right, thank you. So this second session, it might be shorter. Just wanted to kind of show a little bit more applications of this framework that we've been discussing and how we have some ideas that can maybe turn into TRB papers. If anyone's interested, they can reach out to me afterwards. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, I want to illustrate this scenario analysis tool, and then I also want to show how you might modify the problem a little bit to consider subscription plans. And then these are shorter, just kind of like snapshots, slides, just showing some ideas I have that I think can turn into publications. So if anyone's interested in any of those, let me know. Okay. So subsidies. So for that framework, that general framework, we wanted to test that out in a subsidies network because you can at least get a larger size than what I was showing you earlier. In this case, it's expanded from the traditional one. So the traditional one has 24 nodes and 76 links. This one is expanded out to have multiple modes with the zones for those modes, right? MOD nodes and such. So it's 82 nodes, 748 links. To simplify things a little bit, we only use 30 OD pairs. So there's six centroids from which we generate pairs of ODs. And then we test out different policies and scenarios for this. But I think I only showed 2 to 3 cases here. Okay. So this is the example that we're using. And so what separates this from conventional subsidies is here we have each of these vertical colored bars represent a fixed route transit line. All right, or at least a potential fixed route transit line. It's not definite that something will be operated. And then you have these circles representing the OD pairs, or at least the centroids from which you have OD pairs. The colored zones that you see here are potential MOD service regions. Right? So again, they don't know that they want to operate there yet, but they're considering operating in those locations. I could have just completely had them overlap all the zones, but just to kind of show some cases that are overlapping, some that are not overlapping, so we did it this way. And then we have specific congestion functions, link meeting function performance functions, and utilities of 20 for each OD pair, meaning the dummy links connecting these OD pairs have utilities of 20, right? And we're considering different alternative fleet sizes for the MOD fleets as well. Okay, so, and this is all in the paper, which should be out in a month. All right. So the base case results, if we just ran this based on the parameters that I noted earlier, we would get an exact solution to L1 rate, right? So it's a guaranteed optimum. And so this solution ends up having a lot of people just kind of not using any of the services. So these are people just kind of like walking along the links, and so there's no operating costs for them. The operating costs are along the blue route. So only operator 1, which is the blue route, runs the service with this range of the revenue that they might get. The user payoffs, if you add them up, these are the user payoffs that you would see. So in the buyer optimal case, users benefit more, right? So that would be the higher one. The total system optimal cost is the objective value of the ZL1, and that's 108,800. And there's about 1,200 people not served. So those 1,200 people are going along those dummy links because for them it's too expensive to use this platform. So basically, this MOS service, they're not interested in using it. They're using other alternatives. We consider the case now. Then what happens if we reduce the operating costs of the MOD provider operator 5, which is the purple operator? So we cut their operating costs in half, And this is not explicitly included as a, because this is a scenario, right? So we're only saying what happens if it's just cut in half, but the source of that would probably be like some kind of subsidy. What happens is at that point we get a solution that required injecting further subsidies. The ZL1S is our best solution, and in this case, this indicates that the range of the revenue for operator 1 stays the same at the buyer optimal level, but goes down at the suboptimal level. You see also 2 MOD operators entering the market. So the obvious one is this one, because they have reduced operating costs. But the surprising one is operator 6 also joins the market because now there's through the flows they see an incentive to operate their service as well. Right? So we can see these kinds of synergies occurring. The user benefits in both cases, right? So overall users would benefit. So the question is whether or not these subsidies would be able to cover those benefits that they have. The total system cost is very similar to before, and the unserved demand drops a little bit. So it helps attract more people to this platform. A little bit more, right? 1%. Yeah. So these are the link flows that you see, and corresponding to this. So this means that maybe these people from here to here might be walking here, and then they get into this service region of the purple operator, and then they get connected over to that node. Right. So that's one example of the path that they might take. Right. And corresponding to these flows, we would also see these are the buyer and seller optimal prices for each of the links. So you can break that down. You can also break down the subsidy per user on the paths. This is the amount that you have to subsidize for this particular path. And so you can identify all of that to provide guidance on how to make the system stable. Okay. Yeah. And note that in these cases some of these paths are multimodal paths, in that they're taking in particular this one they walk here, they take the MOD service, and then they take the fixed route. In this scenario, what we want to examine the case where the users are now heterogeneous in terms of the utility that they receive for completing a trip. So earlier it was $20 of utility for everybody, for every OD pair. Now we split them into 2 groups. So half of the demand would earn $24 of income for completing a trip. The other half would earn only 16. And we wanted to see, having this discrepancy between 2 different groups, what would happen under the assignment matching. Okay. And what we see is that in this case, it looks a little bit similar to the earlier case, but now there's some added, compared to the base case, there's a few added MOD services for operator 5 and 6. The interesting thing, though, is that all the services that are being provided in the MOD, they're essentially serving only the higher income group, and the lower income group misses out on all these benefits. So they end up still not really being used. They stay out of the market, even though, and overall, the unserved demand goes up, even though like the high income is not as much, it's significantly lower. So this lets us kind of look at how these trade-offs would benefit different user groups, particularly if we're interested in equity impacts. All right. So we have this platform equilibrium tool that can achieve a stable matching with or without subsidy. The model is sensitive to changes in operating costs, travel costs, external utilities, and network structures. One note I want to make about the utility, I forgot to mention. When we talk about like, the OD utility is 20, the way we can interpret that also is we can think of it as that's the utility of not using this system. So it could be the best alternative that they can find outside of the system. So how do you get that? You can estimate like let's say a mode choice model for all the other modes and alternatives for travel outside of the platform, and then you can take if it's like a logit model, you can take a log sum of that to represent like the best utility that they can gain, right? So there's ways that we can capture that. Okay. So we took this framework. We also looked at alternative pricing schemes. In this case, we wanted to examine, if they're going to be grouping together in the same platform, can they design pricing schemes that might be more effective? The way that we have it set up in the base case is that each operator charges a fee per link, right? Just for convenience, it's more additive that way. In an earlier study that I had with another student, Ted Pantelides, we looked at pricing that's per use of an operator. So like if an operator is included in a route, they charge once, regardless of how many links are used. So there's different ways to price this. We could set it up as a pricing by just a single cash fare for using the platform, regardless of your OD pair, right? You can have just single cash fare. It could be OD based, it could be zone based. So there's different pricing schemes that can be considered, right? We can also look at unlimited ride plans, right? Whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, annual. You could look at group fares, having multiple users for a given ticket. So maybe the pricing scaling, it doesn't go up linearly, but it goes up like that. The single ticket could be by OD pair. It could be by population segment, right? By age, student, or income, regardless of OD or mode or route. It could also be by OD pair, regardless of population segment or mode or route. Right? So there's a lot of ways you can explore how to operate these and then run the model to see what's the result, to see whether or not there's an improvement in the social welfare or improvement in revenue. Okay. As an example, consider OD-based fare, right? So in this case, just knowing that you're starting from this location, going to that location, so it's kind of like a zone-based fare, but even more specific to different OD pairs. But we can also think of it as a zone-based fare payment. Right, so users with a subscription paying this kind of fare, they would pay per OD level. The matching problem is the same, it doesn't change. What changes is that in the stability conditions, we have to modify, instead of fare payment per link or line, we end up having a fare payment per OD pair instead. So there's some adjustments in the math, right? But very, very manageable. So we're able to show then, for the same example that we showed earlier, if we change the pricing scheme from the route-specific fares that we had earlier, the additive ones, to OD-based ones, these would be the resulting revenues that we would get in total, right? So adding up all the operators, which seems quite beneficial to use an OD-based or zone-based pricing scheme, which aligns well with some of another earlier study I had done with colleagues at UNSW, where we looked at different pricing schemes, and zone-based one seemed to be an effective one. Right, so you definitely consider that if you're thinking about different pricing schemes. In this zone-based, OD-based approach, we considered what happens if we reduce the operator 4's operating costs, and you can see that it can quantify the changes in terms of the revenues range. And in fact, what happens here is this range goes from this 2,400, it goes up, and then the 90,000 goes up also. So it kind of shifts your solution space, right? The outcome space higher. So okay. Are there any questions before I go into this session, this part? Yeah.
Thank you. And I have the types of subscription.
Yeah.
So have you ever thought about the regularity-based subscription? For example, commuters can guarantee some fixed demand. So it can helpful to guarantee some stable optimization results. So
yeah. So you're saying so there's like unlimited ride monthly plans and yearly plans out there. But what you're saying is not like that, but you're buying the same trip over a year, like that,
same,
right? Something like
yeah.
that. Every Monday to Friday, you take the same ride, so it allows you to pay a discounted amount. Yeah, I think that's possible. I mean, so the model that we have right now is structured around trip level, right? But you would have to consider really multi-day usage, right? So we have a project right now with the city of Arlington in Texas. They operate probably the most successful microtransit service in the U.S. Through VIA. It has pretty high ridership, and they do have subscription plans for like weekly or monthly. But we're helping them. So we're building like a subscription choice model where we consider like a nested model, so they're choosing a subscription or not subscription, and then the resulting mode choice after that. And so like you might be able to look into something like that in changing the model structure to accommodate some kind of non-trip level choices of behavior that they're considering. So does that answer your question? Any other questions?
In New York City, regarding the pricing scheme.
Yeah.
So for the micro mobility service, and probably we let's assume we hang out with our friends, we share the same OT.
Mhm.
So is there any specific type of a card for those group behavior, group travel?
Yeah.
So the peer.
Yeah, New York they don't, but I think so. VIA, when they were operating, they considered if you have one person in your group, it's $5. If you consider two people, it's like $7.50. So they do have some kind of mechanism for providing discounts for groups. I think there's promise there because when we look at the data for VIA in Arlington, although it looks successful, it's still a very small percentage of the population, a very small percentage of the trips that are using that, and most of them are still driving, right? And if you look at the average group size per trip, it's about 1.1, which is mostly single person per trip, right? And so my hypothesis is if you have a larger group in Texas that wants to travel, it's probably more efficient for them just to drive to get from place to place. So if you want to compete against auto, you really do need to consider some of these kind of revenue management strategies to try to incentivize people more to travel in groups. Especially for these kinds of services, occupancy rates are oftentimes one of the challenges. That they often have very low occupancy rates, right? And so you want to increase that, maybe incentivize more groups to travel. And so one way we're doing that, or at least in modeling that right now, is looking at Poisson distributions for choosing entering a group size, right? So like the probability that you belong in a group of X amount that you can calibrate to data and then fit that into the choice of ridership to evaluate other alternatives designs later. Okay. Anything else before I continue? Okay. So I have a couple of different brainstorming ideas. I think they are viable topics for quick research papers with TRV. I know it's late. It's only a month left, but let's see. Right? Who knows? Maybe we'll get something going. So one is looking at mobility hubs. So mobility hubs are quite practical way of thinking of multimodal systems right now. Right. So you focus, especially for public agencies is like focusing on the infrastructure. How do you reshape the infrastructure to incentivize different operators to make use of your system, right? So like it could be looked at as like last mile hubs where you have transit that attracts on-demand services or feeder buses or car share, bike share services at those locations. How would our model framework apply to this? So the requirement, so I'll use prerequisite to say, if you have this already, right? So data on existing hub investments, maybe zonal demand to calibrate the model. You can then look at a method to design hubs in a multimodal mobility as a service environment, right? The changes to our framework essentially involve turning off fixed route link decision variables. So we assume that, let's say, the public transit links are all there already. So those are all parameters, they're not decision variables. We limit the decisions for MOD services only to hub locations and maybe to the centroids. So it's where do we make those connections? So it's not like the base model that I showed you earlier was captured all different types, right? But now we can focus it just on hub locations. We can even look at just one single hub and say, if we were to turn this station into a hub for other services, what are the operating costs of these other mobility services that would incentivize them to come into this, right? We can look at what kind of fare pricing to set up for that single hub case, right? So that's one thing I'm having a student look at over at NYU, but if other students are interested in that, we can talk more about that. Right. Yeah, so one thing is like considering subsidy, if we wanted to reimburse, right, or reduce, basically pay for part of the mobility on demand operators ride, because maybe for them, operating there might be too costly. So we cover it enough so that they're incentivized to join the market. And then, the question is like determining how much that is, right? Which is what our model can do. And the output of this, so if we have this data on some hub investments somewhere, and you have demand data calibrated, we can then look at comparing against the existing condition and looking at the optimal design. We can output some metrics and draw some comparisons. Right? So very applied, I think, it's similar along the lines of a recent study from TU Delft, where they published in TR Part A, right, looking at hubs for transfers, right? But they don't consider, I don't think they consider designing, but it's more like just saying there's a hub there and they wanted to look at the transfer benefits. Okay, a second topic I thought about. It's still similar to the hub concept, but I wanted to focus more from the perspective of the public transit agency. So you have a transit agency, and maybe they think about growing out further into the suburbs. How far should they extend their fixed route? At what point should they switch to provide on-demand service? Right? There are conventional methods in the literature. I think some studies from DeGanzo, some studies from Paul Schoenfeld have looked into those. But in this context, we can then look at it in a more kind of like multimodal setting, right? Involving other mobility providers, and also that pricing incentive. How do we consider that exchange between the agencies? So if we start out with transit network data, which very easily accessible, like GTFS data, zone data. That's the if you're looking at something in maybe Daejeon or something somewhere. Contribution here, we're looking at transit route network design with on-demand options, right? So it's a specific problem, but we're kind of taking the base framework that I had mentioned earlier, simplifying it to smaller considerations so that we can answer these kinds of questions, right? The key here, I think, we want to make sure we capture the transfer impedances and also looking at the fare bundling. And so we would then have an output redesigned transit network, quantified improvements, determining what the needs are for subsidy, predicted ridership, fare bundle pricing, things like that. Okay. All right. A third one, for those that are working with algorithm design, this is in the case where you're considering existing, let's say there's base case fleet management algorithm, maybe Studio G, and they're looking at a new algorithm, and they want to know what's the impact of implementing this new algorithm in a space with other mobility providers, transit fleets, and so forth. What we can do is then consider using a fleet simulator. So we did build one in a project with the company Moya. So this is available open source. We call it Nomad RPS. We actually use AI, ChatGPT, to help us name that. All right, and then we can use this similar then to calibrate steady state parameters. Right, so one of your questions earlier was like, can we consider dynamic case? I mean, so because even the static model is so complicated, what we can do is just look at maybe in this case just calibrating the steady state parameters based on the simulator. And then using that to provide guidance, then we can determine what's the resulting change in stable pricing impacts of the new algorithm and quantify the benefits that way. Okay. Oh, sorry. All right. Another topic, parameter learning. So, so let's say you do operate a mobility as a service system already, or you're working with a company that's doing that. Let's say you have existing mode route choice data over time, and you want to then consider maybe a continuously updating, like a Bayesian updating approach, where you get new information and you would be able to update the user route choice data over time. So you're estimating these parameters and updating those parameters over time to refine the dummy link. So it's looking at how the system would evolve over time, right? Maybe you might see a trend where the dummy links, which correspond to people not wanting to participate in this service, right? Maybe that you see it increasing over time by these updates, and that might give you advance warning to say, oh, maybe we need to plan for the fact that this might go over a threshold, and such that we have to make some changes. Right? So this is looking at developing like a dynamic decision support framework that incorporates this kind of learning. I think it leads towards a kind of like a digital twin implementation where you might have a MOS system, and then you have this updated learning with the parameters to provide inputs on new strategies. Okay. But yeah, this one probably might require some more existing data to work with. Alternative pricing schemes. This is related to what I mentioned earlier, right? So we can explore other pricing schemes. So if you have data from an existing multimodal system with certain pricing schemes already and ridership for different population segments, you can then propose other types, right? Zone-based, distance-based, fixed per operator or fixed per OD at a bundle level, and then optimize that and find like what's stable, what works under multimodal setting, right? And then you can also look at derivative metrics, like consumer surplus, equity, VMT, greenhouse gas emissions. You can look at all those outputs as well. So I think that's also very practical, and looking at these different pricing schemes can be interesting. Okay, congestion pricing. So for those who don't know, New York City was going to put in a congestion pricing plan, and then they canceled it a few weeks back. So the governor just decided to hold off indefinitely, which is unfortunate. But in the spirit of that, of that setting, if we have data from existing multimodal system with these congested travel times, congestion pricing design, traffic volumes entering and exiting a cordon, we can then look at routes that cross the cordon, right, and try to link that with like macroscopic fundamental diagrams for traffic conditions relating to the flows, inbound, outbound flows, to get the travel times from which we can perhaps be able to help them quantify the impacts of a certain congestion pricing plan on the usage of other modes in and out of the system, right? So this is a little bit more abstract, but I thought it's something we can throw out at people if they're interested. Okay. Adapting the design to freight deliveries. I think this is my last one. So all this that I've been talking about, multiple operators, so far was all pertaining to passenger travel, but it can just as easily be adapted to deliveries, urban deliveries, last mile, and especially now in post-COVID, I think deliveries, the volume of that, the growth of that is even much more than what we're seeing with passengers, passenger travel. And so it might even make a lot more sense, in fact, to look at deliveries now. So in this case, if you have this kind of data, which I find is much harder to get, but if someone does have access to this, you can probably look basically different delivery services that might potentially band together, right? Consolidate and provide bundled services to deliver orders from pickup to delivery. You might be able to look at some kind of mass type framework. And then be able to evaluate the use of different providers like cargo bikes or micro hubs with transfers from trucks to other modes. So some of that logistics, those kinds of questions can then be answered. Okay, and I think that's pretty much it. So I just added a Kakao talk when I came to Korea. So you're welcome to add me and message me with questions. And I think this problem has a lot of rich applications. So very interested in talking more with people if they have interest to discuss more. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Any questions, comments? Joseph? I have a question about the simulation-based
Yeah.
return
Sure.
evaluation.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about
Let me go back.
your plan?
My plan? Yeah. So the idea with this is that if you have a certain type of service and you're operating in a certain way with an algorithm, based on that, you can collect the data on like average operating costs for different travel OD pairs. You can get average travel times because you can get like maybe on average is 1.2 times the taxi time it takes to get from place to place. Right? But then now you switch the algorithm. Maybe you have an algorithm that makes people travel a little farther to get to the stop, but then it reduces the cost of operating service. And so you want to see what does that mean in that service region with other providers, right? Would it be more competitive in pushing them out of the market maybe? Maybe it might get more people to join the market at that location. Maybe they will pay a little bit more. So this would make use of the framework where you would simulate the two different algorithms and then use the outcomes to recalibrate the steady state parameters and then look at two different designs side by side. I think that would be a very practical way to just evaluate the impacts. Okay.
Any other questions? Until I have 4 questions from the audience and not from the previous. Because this is the last lecture, so they just want to finish earlier.
So, yeah.
Do you have any questions, comments?
Yeah,
Good.
tricky one in your context for micro mobility service, e-scooter and shared bicycle. What is a dockless or docked? Which one do you think is more suitable as a last mile facility, as a solutions?
Yeah.
In your opinion?
In my opinion, I think so. The city is always very cautious, right? Compared to a lot of other cities that have already invited e-scooters and micromobility programs. So one thing is New York has invested a lot on bike lanes and their existing city bike program. So that partly is like they've already invested in that, so they're they're more hesitant to bring in other modes, especially if they also crowd the street further, right? So that's always been one of their concerns, is the crowding the streets. But now they're seeing a lot of people using like for example, like e-bikes for deliveries. And so they're finding new users of these modes for these micromobility modes that are not necessarily conventional commute trips and things like that. So I think there's these new markets that they're looking at. So for example, New York is even investing in, they've invested in battery swapping stations. I think the first city in the country, in the US, to invest in battery swapping stations for these e-bike delivery workers. So I think there's promise there, looking at like different modes of options that might not just benefit passengers, but maybe delivery workers. As far as dockless versus docked, I think it's going to be hard to make it completely dockless, but I think you can probably have some form of dockless, but maybe still with some corral that they have to be placed in those locations and geofenced, because New York is very picky about their space. So I would bet on that. In fact, we recently published a paper looking at designing e-scooters in Manhattan, and the scheme that we considered was the same one that was originally adopted at Santa Monica in LA, where they looked at these corrals to place e-scooters. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right.
Sorry.
I was joking actually. Too much pressure.
Yeah.
I have a question about congestion pricing.
Yeah.
So I wonder, you believe the congestion pricing works well, because some people, if there is congestion pricing, they quit their. Some people quit the driving sometimes.
Mhm.
So if in the worst case, that congestion pricing can occur any other parking problems. So
This is being recorded, right? Okay.
Can be deleted. Don't worry.
Congestion pricing has always been very like a political charged question too, right? So especially lately after the governor canceled it, now people are asking me on my opinion to be published in our news articles. But I think it's the conventional use of congestion pricing is, one is to reduce congestion and the other one is to raise revenues. New York has been adopting that. I get the sense the priority that they had was raise revenue, in the sense that they were planning to set congestion price all throughout the day, even during off peaks, at a lower value, but still always there, and at a pretty high level, right? $15 when entering the city. And it's tricky in New York, particularly because the geography of the location is almost like it's a bottleneck in the region. Long Islanders have to cross over it to get to New Jersey and vice versa. And so it's not as easy to implement as, say, London or Stockholm or Singapore, especially Singapore, right, where they have such autonomy. Sorry for yelling into the mic. Autonomy over the region, whereas in New York you have so many jurisdictions, and so when you think about revenue collection as one of the root causes or root purposes of this, and then with the purpose that after you collect the revenue you're supposed to redistribute it, but their intent was primarily to redistribute it to MTA, which is a New York State agency, and it's only focusing on the primarily New York City Transit, which is the transit in New York, but I think also with some improvements along like Long Island, Metro North, and those other MTA operated systems. But you can see like that can be tricky, right? Because now you're allocating the revenues to a particular mode for a particular set of users, and so that can lead to a lot of disgruntled population. So I think that's also one thing. So it's the multi-jurisdiction, it's the allocation specifically to PTA users. I mean, it could still benefit. Overall, I think we should. I was really sorry to see them cancel it or delay it. At the very least, we can learn from an initial deployment and then adjust things, right, and see how things go. But yeah, we'll see how how it happens. But my guess is right now this is the election year, so we don't know.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Anything else? Yeah.
My problem is more about the technical thing.
Yeah.
I find that recently the air traffic, the urban air traffic is becoming a hot topic. So what do you think about how to incorporate the air traffic in the mass framework?
Yeah. It's almost required, I think, for urban air traffic because they have limited access, right? So there's only certain vertiports that you have to go to use them. So it's almost like you have to consider their usage in as a bundle with other services, like maybe you have to book a taxi to get to the vertiport to use the air taxi to get elsewhere. So it would make sense to combine the fare pricing together. So I think this kind of framework could be very useful for that. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay. I mean, one thing to be careful of is with urban air mobility, it tends to cater more towards high value of time users, right, or use cases. And so, like I think airport access. Maybe rich people going to events and games and things like that, or healthcare access, right? Going to the hospital, those kind of emergency uses could be very important. But because of that, it's sometimes hard to bundle that with certain modes. Like it almost doesn't make sense to like combine it with a bus route to get to there to use, because then it's you want to get there as soon as possible. So so you probably want to couple that with taxi services or something. Okay, thanks. Anything else?
Right.
All right. Thank you very much.